Thanks so much for stopping by today. This is Budget Wine with Bacchus Bruce, and we're here to talk about the 2012 Elementum red wine blend from California. And I have to say that the most exciting part of this bottle of wine, other than that it's $4.99, is that it has some age on it. It's a 2012, and here in 2018 we are certainly looking for anything that has a little bit of age, particularly from a good vintage, and 2012 certainly was a good vintage, and I'm very excited about the potential here. So what really we want to talk about primarily with red wine blends is how fun they are. And if you haven't had the chance to do a wine blending panel, it is really something that you need to take advantage of. And most wineries at some point or another will have events for their members where you get a chance to kind of be a winemaker. And typically what they'll do is they'll set up say 3 different scenarios with different proportions of wine that the winemaker has kind of settled on making a final decision with. Say for example, it's a Merlot based blend and it's 70% Merlot, 20% Cab Franc, and say 10% Petit Verdot, for example. So on a tasting panel blend or a blending panel, you're going to have maybe a little bit of difference on the primary varietal, and then you're going to have some differences as well on your secondary varietals, and ultimately you're looking to hopefully find the right balance that the different parts of your blend will hopefully find a balance and a harmoniousness that will sell, and really that is the goal. So that said, we also have to mention that most red wines are blends, depending on where it's from, whether it's an estate or a single vineyard. There is going to be a percentage of wine that is allowable for blending. So you're really not going to have typically a whole lot of 100% this or 100% that. In most cases, the winemaker is going to take advantage of the law of making wine, that they will typically add in some other varietals to enhance the overall effect of your primary varietal. And it's not unusual. A typical what they call Bordeaux blends. Bordeaux's have been around for many, many, many years, and the French have been doing Bordeaux blends, basing it either on Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot, and then blending it with your typical varietals, which we all know are Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. Though, not always. You certainly can use 100% of a varietal if the wine and the winemaker's taste really is where he wants or she wants it to be. And there's absolutely nobody's telling you that you can't do this or you can do that. It's really up to the winemaker's discretion as to how the blend ultimately comes out. And the other thing that I'm a little, concerned is really an overstatement for a $4.99 wine, but the California designation wine is something that you typically see on wines that don't really have a pedigree. And so we're hoping that this wine, though we don't really honestly know where the grapes are sourced from, are going to be good grapes and good juice, and hopefully we're going to have some success enjoying this bottle of 2012 Elementum red blend. So let's go ahead and learn a little bit about where our wine came from, and take a look at some slides, and we'll do a little bit of digging and see if we can get some more information on this wine before we pop it, and then we try to find something to pair it with. So let's go to the slideshow. The 2012 Elementum Red Wine Blend is designated as California, though hopefully since the wine is bottled in the Santa Barbara area, it will contain fruit from that region of California. The label indicates that the wine is classic, where it usually says reserve, which is kind of different. I'm not sure what classic would indicate on a bottle of wine. It's not something you see every day. Let's hope it is indeed a classic. Bottlers here decided to have a little bit of fun with the labeling of their wines, putting out 3 different labels to create a sort of collect-em-all feeling. The idea is that the different labels capture a different element or component of life here on Earth. Sky, fire, and land are all represented. While I like the idea of fun labels, was this time and effort really necessary for a wine that's not an estate wine, but made from what is more than likely purchased bulk wine? Not really sure, but still, I like the whimsiness of the concept. Here's the breakdown of the blend used in the 2012 Elementum. Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are the primary varietals found in traditional Bordeaux blends, while Syrah, whose ancestral home is in the Rhône region of France, is not something that's usually blended, though of course winemakers don't always have to follow the rules. One thing I always like to point out is that red blends, and even white blends, are called a winemaker's best friend, because it allows them to use up any leftover wine from the bottling of a single varietal. Perhaps the winemaker had some Syrah lying around, and from the tasting trials found a harmonious blend that could get rid of some of this Syrah, that maybe wasn't dynamic enough by itself, or perhaps lacked quantity. We'll never know, but we'll certainly try to sniff out the different components in the blend when we pop the bottle. And of course, what a deal we're getting here. The suggested retail price is $16.99. That's more than 3 times what we paid for at the grocery outlet. What a deal. So we don't know where the fruit is sourced from, unfortunately, but we can certainly figure out where the wine was bottled. Lompoc is located in Southern California, in a terrific region for wine grape growing. Santa Barbara area wines are known for having wonderful fruit expression due to optimal climatic conditions. Its proximity to the coast keeps the vines cool in the evening, but daytime highs tend to not get too scorching hot. This is a beautiful area of California with lots of places to explore, both wine and non-wine related. But if you're a cork dork like me, you'll be drawn to wineries to try the local juice. Lompoc, like most winery-driven areas, has an established zone for exploring the wines of the area. Lompoc's wine zone is humorously known as the Wine Ghetto. Again, it's that whole thing about making decisions. So many wineries, so many beautiful nearby sites. Where do you start? What I find fun is to try some of the wine from the wine region you'll be traveling to before you arrive, so that when you get there you have an idea of what types of wine you'd like to explore further. Santa Barbara has a reputation for making beautiful Pinot Noirs, for example. However, this kind of trip prep requires buying wine at full boat, something Bacchus Bruce is not inclined to do very often. And finally, before talking about the wine itself, here's a 2012 vintage review from the Wine Institute. The Wine Institute is a major part of the wine industry's hidden muscle in the world of commerce. In addition to being a clearinghouse for information about wine in California and the U.S., they also act as lobbyists for the wine industry, providing a valuable service to representing the best interests of the wine industry. So 2012 was again a fantastic growing season, coming off the challenging, wet, rainy 2011 vintage, where grapes sometimes hung onto the vine well into November, with picking frantically happening between rainstorms. The 2012 harvest was fairly easy. The joke in vintages like 2012 is that your dog could have made good wine. Truthfully, a winemaker can't really blame the quality of the fruit if a wine comes out not so good in a vintage like 2012. And seeing as we're now in 2018, the wines really had some time to get some bottle age, something Bacchus Bruce really enjoys, as time adds another dimension to wine, sometimes making a good wine a great wine. Of course, not all wines are structured to age, but at an opening price point of $16.99, the Elementus Red should have the backbone to allow the beauty of age to shine through. We'll see. Yeah, the 2012, terrific vintage, a lot of good juice out there, and we're fortunate enough here 6 years later to be able to still enjoy something that is not going to be something you'll find, particularly at $4.99, very often. So again, the wines that we're going to be using here at the program are all going to be coming from the grocery outlet, and here in Hayward, California, we do have a couple of them. And one of the neat things about Grocery Outlet is that the assortment varies from store to store. So depending on where you are, and if you've been going to the same one and you're kind of running out of new stuff to try and your price points, drive to another one. There's got to be at least a dozen here in the Bay Area, and they are going to be all a little bit different. Now, of course, you can always spend a little bit more money and get into the $6.99, $7.99, and they certainly go up to $20, think maybe 25 bucks is probably where they top out at the grocery outlet. But you know, here at Budget Wine with Bacchus Bruce, we are trying to stay at $5, and I think we're going to have a winner here. I'm very excited about it. I hope you are too. So let's talk a little bit about stemware. So this is from Target. Got them for 13 bucks for a case of 4, so we're talking a little over $3 a glass. It's kind of an interesting shape. It's really kind of a Pinot round, but it also has kind of a height, which you'll find in a Bordeaux glass. So it's a little unusual, but you know, it is glass, and it does have a nice balance to it. And I think for a budget wine budget, you can't really do any worse, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the wine then. So the closure is cork, as we can tell, no screw cap, which is really kind of a better deal for a wine that has been aging here, coming on 6 years now. We all know that screw caps are certainly kind of foolproof in terms of avoiding cork taint. But a lot of people who drink wine and enjoy aged wine really prefer cork. In fact, there's been some fires pretty recently in Portugal, and with these fires in some of the cork oak forests, it's really giving them an opportunity to replant. And it seems like there is kind of a growing movement now, a bit of a backlash against against screw caps. People want cork. Something about cork, I guess it's just something that people really identify with wine, and it kind of gives a little bit of mystery and a little bit of kind of a tradition. And so we're going to be talking cork here. So then you kind of look at the package itself and you kind of wonder, so it was $16.99 at one point in time, and usually with a wine at that price point, you're going to be finding some kind of bells and whistles. So I look, for example, at the punt, which is the bottom of the bottle, and you can kind of tell that it's not particularly deep. When you do get into some of the really higher end wines, you're going to find that the punts can be ridiculously deep. We always make the joke about the big punts that you can actually take a little bath in. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so the wine bottle's really not particularly deep. So then we talk about the foil, and the foil is on a cheaper wine, it's going to be plastic, and on a finer wine, is going to be mostly metal. So I'd like to say that we should try the foil test. So you pull the foil off now. In a setting where you're with family or a restaurant, they're going to cut it, and you're going to go through the whole rigmarole. In budget wine landia, where we live, we just take the we just take the foil right off. So we're going to go ahead and take the foil off, and we're going to kind of give it the grip test, and we're going to kind of see, ooh, crumbling. So it does definitely have a nice percentage of metal, but it has a really kind of funny little thing that came off there, so that's unusual. So we're looking at now the cork, and one of the things you're always looking for with wine is to see how it's been treated. So we definitely want to make sure that our cork is moist but not dry and not too wet. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what we got here. And in the meantime, we can talk about some other things like the alcohol level. So this wine is coming in at 13%, which is very nice. So oftentimes you get into the 14s, 13.9, 14.1, and yes, they are delicious and they do add more power, but you can kind of get into that situation where you're also maybe getting into wines that are just a little bit too hitting it over the head with alcohol, because alcohol is something that we want to keep in balance. It shouldn't be too hot or too overpowering. It should be integrated with the wine itself. All right, so we take a look at our cork, and we can see that it is got a little bit of moisture, which is nice. And you know, some people do like to do the grip test on it, and it should give a little bit. What you're certainly looking for is to make sure that it's, again, not too wet and not crumbling. and it's neither. So so far so good. All right. So then let's take a look at the color, which is for 2012. Probably going to be breaking down a little bit initially from when it was first bottled. It has been 6 years, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, of course, we always want to make sure that we take a look at our wine with a white background. It really helps to really kind of give you an idea of what we're looking for, which is primarily on the edge here. We want to make sure that we don't have any discoloration going on. So looking at it, we can kind of see that it's a little light, which you know, kind of surprising, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. So again, we are talking about a blend here with Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Syrah. Now, I did a little bit of reading, and I had almost forgotten about the famous Lindemans Cabernet Sauvignon Shiraz, which is one of Australia's greatest coups, because it really kind of paved the way to the American market for a blend, which in the Southern Hemisphere they call Shiraz, of course. In the Northern Hemisphere, we know it more as a Syrah. All right, so let's go ahead then and see what we got. We're, again, hoping to find, if we can, the different components of the wine, the Cab, the Merlot, and the Syrah. It's not always easy. Now, we did see from the tasting notes that there is some oak barrel aging going on with this wine. And again, that's fairly common for red wines. You're not going to often find red wines that have no oak on them, though you do run into them from time to time. Beaujolais, for example, is a wine that is oftentimes done with no oak. And certainly other winemakers who are a little bit more avant-garde are really trying to push the envelope and see if consumers are willing to go with red wines that don't have any oak on them, and kind of recondition them to kind of think about wine a little bit differently, because so oftentimes red wine goes with oak, and that's always how it's been and how it always will be, and well, maybe things can be different. So again, we're looking at the wine here, and we are seeing, well, I don't know. I guess I don't have my Wine Folly poster. I probably need to get one. But Wine Folly certainly makes a wonderful poster that kind of talks about different wine colors and what they mean in different varietals. So again, we don't really know the percentage of what we have here, but more than likely it's going to be Cabernet based. So we do have a little tiny bit of oxidation going on, unfortunately. Not in a really bad way, but there's certainly a little whiff of it going on. And again, we kind of take the good with the bad with $4.99 wines. There is a reason, again, that they are in grocery outlet at $4.99. For whatever reason, these wines just didn't make it to the big leagues, and they ended up in the clearance rack, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that helps you and me to enjoy interesting wines at a good price point. So smelling, we can kind of get a little bit of the barrel component. We have a little bit of that kind of cedary component that you get with red wine. But again, it's really not overpowering by any means. It's mostly kind of a restrained nose, and sometimes you get that with wines. They don't always jump out at you immediately. Sometimes, personally, I like to enjoy wine over 2 days, and actually that's what we'll be doing in most cases, because we're going to be talking about food and wine pairing as part of our program as well. And trying a wine on the second day, hey, you never know. It could even be better. Stranger things have happened. So let's go ahead and see what we've got here, and see if we're going to be wowed. So yeah, wine is a little bit thin, and we can kind of see that from the color. It's fairly opaque, and you know, the wine tasting notes did mention that drink through 2017, and I can kind of see why. You do have, sometimes what happens is the fruit drops out of the wine, and you kind of just get leftover structure and color, but really kind of muted flavors. The finish is, again, it's not real clean. It is a little bit muddled, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of drinking actually more like an Italian wine. Quite honestly, it's not really fruit forward at all. It really has, in my opinion, a little bit of kind of an earthiness and kind of a sweet and sour that sometimes you can see in Chiantis, for example. But it is a little bit hard to find the cab. Now, I personally am getting some of that Syrah. Syrah sometimes can be surprising. The range really can be all over the place. It can be really fruity and cherry bomby like a Shiraz, or it can be really structured and firm and kind of herbal like Syrahs from Rhone. It seems to me that the Syrah is really kind of the best part of this wine. It's kind of carrying through what little fruit is left in the wine, and I'm thinking it could probably improve from a little bit of time being opened. As it opens up in the glass, you do get a little bit more of the Syrah feeling, but not so much, because it is a wine that's kind of unfortunately kind of going down. But I'm glad we tried it, and we're going to find something delicious to eat with it. So thanks so much for trying it, and we'll see you in a bit with something to eat. All right, so we were thinking, you know, this wine here really kind of is showing kind of an Italian sort of feel, in my opinion, at its ripe old declining age of 6 years old. But, you know, it's actually on day 2, and again, we are on day 2, because kind of one of the things we're going to do is we're going to be trying a wine over a couple days, not all the time, but whenever we can. And really finding that the nose is really come around. It's definitely got some pretty fruit going on, dried fruit, as you can imagine. So dried strawberries, dried violets. I'm not really getting, again, much of that oxidation that we kind of were getting whiffs of yesterday. It seems like it's kind of blown off, I guess, as you can call it. And again, we didn't take much out of the bottle yesterday, just enough to try it. Of course, having a full bottle or a fuller bottle than an emptier bottle is going to allow less headspace for air to get in, and less chance of worse things happening to your wine. But I think in an everyday sort of environment, when you're, you know, busy, like we all are busy, and you don't necessarily get through a whole bottle of wine in one day, it's I think kind of fun to try it on the second day. So here we are. So we are going to Italy. So we've got a little bit of prosciutto and melon together, as you can see from the picture that we put on the conclusion of the tasting portion. And again, all of it's coming out of grocery outlets. So Grocery Outlet Bargain Market, we're probably going to be doing a lot of food and wine tasting from there, which in my opinion is really a good economical way to go. So we have some beautiful prosciutto, which is coming from a brand called Applegate Naturals. $1.99 a pound, excuse me, $1.99 for a 4-ounce portion, which comes out to about $8 a pound. Now, we all know that prosciutto is not $8 a pound in a normal grocery store price. It could be at double, and then higher quality, of course, can get really crazy with some of our specialties, Spanish hams and whatnot. But, you know, one of the things you always have to keep in mind is that Grocery Outlet is the kind of place where it's time sensitive, so your dates have to be observed very diligently, because you don't want to be picking up stuff that's going to be fading out on you in, you know, a day, a couple of days, even a week. So today actually is the best before date, which, hey, today's the day. Let's do it. Sounds good to me. We've got some beautiful cantaloupe that we got, $2 for a pretty good sized cantaloupe. And again, with this particular type of pairing, we're really not wanting really ripe cantaloupe like we would normally have for breakfast with our toast and coffee. We want it to be maybe a little bit less ripe to kind of balance better with the meat, the wine, and the reduced balsamic vinegar, which we're going to be drizzling on here in a bit. And just for fun, just to kind of mix it up a bit, we do have some wheat crackers and some provolone cheese. Again, wheat crackers, box came in at $1.50 or something like that. Really, we're talking economical budget wine and food pairing fun. So let's go ahead and drizzle a little bit of balsamic vinegar reduction on our cantaloupe, and we'll see what we got here. So again, we determined, and as you can see from the picture that we had, the wine is a little bit light. Now, I don't know if it's always been this light, who knows, but right now it is a little bit light, and it's really kind of showing like a lighter style. I guess Pinot Noir would probably be as good an analogy as we could find. Now, I went out exercising this morning. It's a beautiful day here in Hayward. And if you don't exercise, which is all right, I just wanted to maybe suggest that your palate, believe it or not, does perform a little bit better after you've exercised. You've kind of sweated out those toxins and kind of cleansed your body a little bit. I'm actually quite hungry right now, so this is going to be really exciting. And in my opinion, your palate is a little bit more awake and a little bit more alert to kind of digesting a glass of wine in a kind of analytical way. So again, we're kind of in the same sort of boat we were yesterday, kind of a lighter wine, kind of a meh sort of finish, not super exciting, not disappointing by any means, but just a good solid day 2 bottle of red wine, which can go with something kind of fun. So let's see what we got here. So I think our cantaloupe, from what I saw, is sourced from Guatemala. In today's modern world, that kind of thing's going to happen. And we will probably, as the months go into summer here, we'll be getting into hopefully some domestically produced cantaloupe. But for now, we're importing. And this prosciutto is wonderful. Now again, it's a little bit salty, which I think having the cheese and the crackers is going to kind of cut into that a little bit. But the cantaloupe, sweetness, tartness of the balsamic, saltiness of the prosciutto, and the wine, again, kind of the balsamic really kind of livens up the palate a little bit, and actually picking up more of the wood components in this particular pairing. You kind of can get, again, some of that cederiness that we were talking about. pretty darn good, gotta say. Gonna have to go for more. So let's go ahead and try these low-fat crackers here with rosemary, garlic, kind of sticking with the whole Italian thing, and just some simple provolone cheese, which kind of neutral, base, simple, kind of a foil for your more exciting stuff. And you know what's kind of fun is that the cheese kind of brings out a whole different component. You get a lot more fruit actually coming out from it. You're picking up kind of more dried berry, dried cherry, picking up a little bit of acidity even, which I didn't think was in there. So again, food and wine pairing, always fun, and I hope that you can kind of have some fun as well, because you don't have to be spending big bucks to have fun and eat picnicky type food. You can go to grocery outlet, bargain market, and pick up something reasonable. So as we're wrapping up here, got some great music in this little segment here. So we opened up with Feel the Funk by Jimmy Fontanez. Very nice, kind of get you going. Camaguey, which is a city in Cuba, if we didn't know, by Silent Partner, was what preceded this one. And we're going to be finishing up with Getz Me To Brazil, which is by Doug Maxwell. And Stan Getz, of course, has a very kind of Brazilian feel in some of his pieces, and this is a bit of an ode to him. So I hope you guys had fun. I definitely had fun, and I'm really glad you stopped by, and we look forward to seeing you next time.